The social worker looked at me with pity in her eyes. "Your stepmother has made arrangements for your care," she said gently. "The facility is very nice. You'll be comfortable there." I was sitting in a wheelchair in the living room of my own house, the house my father built, the house I grew up in, and this woman was telling me I was being sent away. My stepmother, Claire, stood behind her, dabbing fake tears with a tissue. "It's just so hard," she whispered. "I can't give him the level of care he needs. It's not fair to him." I looked up at the social worker and smiled. "Before we go anywhere," I said, "there's something you should see." I pulled out my phone and pressed play on a video file. My stepmother's face went white. "Let me tell you how we got here. My name is Andrew. I'm 29 years old. 8 months ago, I was in a skiing accident that left me paralyzed from the waist down. Doctors said I'd never walk again. Gave me the whole speech about accepting my new reality, adapting, and moving forward. My father took it hard. He was 62, recently remarried to a woman 20 years younger, and suddenly his son needed constant care. Claire, my stepmother, had married my dad 3 years earlier. 6 months after my mother died from cancer. I never liked her. She was 42, looked 35, and had a way of making every conversation about her. But my father was lonely. He was grieving, and she paid attention to him when no one else did. Before the accident, I had my own place. Good job in tech sales. Independent life. After the accident, I couldn't manage on my own. My father insisted I move back home. "Just until you figure things out," he said. I moved into my childhood bedroom, now with grab bars in the bathroom and a wheelchair ramp over the front steps. Claire seemed helpful at first, but I noticed things. The sighs when I asked for help. The comments to my father about how having me there was affecting their retirement plans. My father died 4 months after I moved back in. Heart attack. Same as his father. He was working in the garage and he just collapsed. I found him, wheeled myself out when he didn't come back inside. Called emergency services, tried to do CPR from my wheelchair while the dispatcher talked me through it. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. The funeral was a blur. I sat in the front row in my wheelchair while people told me how sorry they were. How strong I was. How proud my father would be. Claire stood beside me in a black dress that cost more than my hospital bills. She held my hand during the service and cried into a monogrammed handkerchief. After everyone left, she sat me down in the living room. "Andrew," she said softly, "we need to talk about your living situation." I waited. "This house was your father's, and now it's mine. I've been thinking, and I don't believe I can continue to provide the level of care you need." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I think you'd be better off in a facility. Somewhere with trained staff, people who know how to help someone in your condition." "This is my home," I said. She smiled, sweetly, patiently. "It was your father's home, and he left it to me. I'm sorry, but that's the reality." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "What about his will?" She handed me a folder. "Your father updated his will 2 years ago. Everything goes to me. The house, the accounts, the life insurance." I opened the folder with shaking hands, read the document, saw my father's signature at the bottom. "There's a trust for you," Claire said. $20,000 for medical expenses, but the bulk of the estate is mine." I looked up at her. 20,000? Dad was worth over 2 million. She shrugged. "He wanted to make sure I was taken care of. I'm his widow. That's how these things work." Something in her tone made me pause. "How long have you been planning this?" Her smile slipped. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." She stood up. "I don't like what you're implying. Your father and I had a legal marriage. He made his choices, and you just happened to convince him to cut his only son out of his will right after that son became disabled." Her eyes went hard. "You're upset. I understand, but this conversation is over." She walked out of the room, left me sitting there with a folder that proved I'd just lost everything. But here's what Claire didn't know. I'm paralyzed, not stupid. And I had been recording everything since the day I moved back in. Not because I suspected anything at first, but because my therapist suggested it. She said documenting my recovery might help me process the trauma, track my progress, see how far I'd come. So I started recording voice memos, video journals, just me talking about my day, my pain levels, my thoughts, and I left my phone recording during conversations I thought might be important. I had dozens of recordings, hours of Claire slowly, carefully convincing my father that I was a burden, that I'd be better off somewhere else, that she deserved security after everything she'd sacrificed. And I had the recording from the day after my father died. Claire called someone on speakerphone while I was supposed to be napping, a man named Richard. Her voice was bright, celebratory. "It's done," she said. "The house is mine, the accounts are mine, and the kid will be in a facility by the end of the month." Richard said something I couldn't quite hear. Claire laughed. "Please, he can barely get out of bed. What's he gonna do, sue me? By the time he figures out what happened, it'll be too late." "What about the trust?" Richard asked. 20,000, Claire said dismissively. "Just enough to look like I cared. The lawyers said it would make the will harder to contest." "You're brilliant," Richard said. "I know," Claire replied. "Now come over tonight, we'll celebrate properly." I had it all, every word, time-stamped, clear audio, and I waited. "Before I continue, drop a comment and let me know what you would have done in this situation. Would you have confronted her immediately? Would you have just accepted the 20,000 and moved on? Let me know." I let Claire make her plans. Let her schedule tours of care facilities. Let her meet with social workers and talk about how difficult it was to care for me. I played the grieving stepson, grateful for her help, too overwhelmed to ask questions. And I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. A probate attorney named Michael Ross, who specialized in elder abuse and estate fraud. I met him at his office, played him on every recording I had. He listened without interrupting. When the last recording finished, he sat back in his chair. "How fast do you want to move?" he asked. "Fast," I said. He made a phone call, then another. By the end of the day, we had a court date for an emergency hearing to freeze my father's estate. Claire found out when the sheriff showed up at the house with papers. She called me screaming. "What did you do?" "I protected myself," I said calmly. "You can't do this. The will is legal." "The will might be legal," I said, "but the way you obtained it isn't. And I have proof." The hearing was 2 weeks later. Claire showed up in a cream-colored suit, with her hair perfectly styled, playing the grieving widow, the devoted stepmother who only wanted what was best for her disabled stepson. Michael played the first recording. Claire's voice filled the courtroom. Her conversation with my father was about how having me in the house was affecting their retirement plans. She deserved to enjoy her golden years without the burden of caring for someone with my condition. Her lawyer objected, claimed the recording was taken without consent. The judge asked if I was present during the conversation. "I was," I said. "I was in my bedroom. They were in the living room. I recorded it on my phone." "One-party consent state," the judge said. "The recording is admissible. Continue." Michael played more recordings. Claire suggested to my father that he update his will. Claire was discussing care facilities while my father was still alive. Then the recording from the day after he died. Claire's laughter filled the courtroom. Her voice was bright and happy as she told Richard that the house was hers, the money was hers, and I would be gone within a month. "The kid will be in a facility by the end of the month. He can barely get out of bed. What's he going to do, sue me? 20,000. Just enough to look like I cared. Now come over tonight. We'll celebrate properly." The judge's face was stone. Claire's lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. When the recording ended, the courtroom was silent. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Claire," he said, his voice cold. "Did you or did you not manipulate your husband into changing his will while his son was recovering from a catastrophic injury?" Claire's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "I was protecting my interests," she finally said. "I'm entitled to my fair share." "You're entitled to nothing," the judge interrupted. This will was obtained through undue influence during a period when your husband was emotionally vulnerable. His son had just been paralyzed. His judgment was compromised, and you took advantage of that. The judge ruled that the will was invalid. The estate reverted to the previous version, where everything went to me. But Michael wasn't done. As we left the courtroom, he leaned down to me. We're going after her for fraud, emotional distress, and attempted exploitation of a disabled person. And I'm calling the district attorney. Why? Because in this state, he said, financial abuse of a vulnerable adult is a felony. I was wheeling myself out of the courthouse when Claire caught up to me in the parking lot. She grabbed my wheelchair, spun me around. Her makeup was ruined. Her designer suit wrinkled. Her perfect mask was completely shattered. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed. "I took care of you. I let you live in my house." "Your house?" I said calmly. "It was never your house, Claire. It was my father's house, and now it's mine. You manipulated him." Tears streamed down her face now, ugly sobs that made people stare. "You recorded me without permission." "That's illegal." I smiled. "Actually, it's not. This is a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I'm part of. And I was part of all of them, even when you thought I was asleep." Her face twisted with rage. "You were spying on me." "I was protecting myself," I said. "Because I knew. I knew from the beginning you didn't want me there. I knew you saw me as an obstacle." I leaned forward in my wheelchair. "But here's what you didn't know, Claire. Being underestimated is the greatest weapon you can have. You looked at me and saw someone helpless. Someone you could control." I held up my phone. "I looked at you and saw someone who would eventually show their true face. And I made sure I'd have proof when you did. You ruined my life," she shrieked. "No," I said quietly. "You ruined your own life. The moment you decided to celebrate my father's death with your boyfriend. The moment you called me the kid like I was a problem to solve instead of a person." I started wheeling away. She grabbed my chair again. Her voice is desperate now. "Andrew, please. We can work this out. I'll give you more money. 50,000. 100. Just don't press charges." I stopped, looked back at her. "You had one job, Claire. Love my father. Honor his memory. Treat his son with basic human decency." I pulled my wheelchair free from her grip. "You couldn't even do that." I wheeled away while she collapsed on the pavement, screaming. Michael, my lawyer, was waiting by his car. He'd watched the whole thing. "Feel better?" he asked. "Not really," I said. "But at least she knows I'm not helpless." He nodded. "The DA wants to move forward with criminal charges. With those recordings and her behavior just now in the parking lot, we've got her on intimidation of a witness too." "Good," I said. The trial took 6 months. Claire hired expensive lawyers, tried to claim the recordings were illegal, tried to say I had misunderstood, tried to paint herself as a grieving widow who'd only wanted what was best for everyone. The jury didn't buy it. They heard her laugh about putting me in a facility, heard her celebrate my father's death, heard her plan to take everything while I was too disabled to fight back. Guilty on all counts. She got 3 years in prison, had to pay $200,000 in restitution for emotional damages, and received a permanent restraining order. Richard, her boyfriend, was charged as an accessory, got probation and had to testify against her to avoid prison time. Claire tried to appeal. The appeal was denied. She served every day of that sentence. That brings us back to the social worker in my living room, the one who'd come to take me to a facility based on Claire's lies. I played her the recordings, all of them. Her pity turned to horror, then to anger. She closed her folder. "Mr. Andrew," she said, "I apologize. We were given completely false information about your care needs and your family situation." She looked at Claire, who was backing toward the door. "Ma'am," the social worker said coldly, "I'll be filing a report with my supervisor about this attempted placement. You lied to our agency. You attempted to institutionalize a man against his will to gain control of his assets." And then she pulled out her phone. "I'm also calling the police. This is elder abuse, and you're not leaving until they arrive." Claire ran. Literally ran out of the house and down the driveway. She didn't get far. The police were already pulling up. Michael had called them the moment the social worker arrived. I watched from my window as they put her in handcuffs. She was screaming, crying, saying it was all a misunderstanding. The officers didn't care. They'd heard the recordings too. The social worker stayed long enough to make sure I was safe. Connected me with resources. Apologized 3 more times before she left. After everyone was gone, I sat in the house. My house now. The one my father built. I'm still in a wheelchair. Still paralyzed. That hasn't changed. But I'm not helpless. I'm not a burden. And I'm not going anywhere. I hired a live-in aide, someone who actually cares, who treats me like a person, not a problem. I sold my father's business, invested the money, set up a foundation in his name that helps people with spinal injuries afford adaptive equipment and legal representation. Because here's what I learned. Being disabled doesn't make you weak. It makes you a target for people like Claire. People who see vulnerability and think opportunity. My father loved her, trusted her. And she used that to try to steal everything from both of us. If I hadn't recorded those conversations, I'd be in a facility right now. Doped up on medications. Visited once a month out of obligation. Forgotten. Instead, Claire's the one locked up, and I'm free. Some people think I was cruel. That I should have just taken the $20,000 and moved on. That sending her to prison was too much. But those people didn't hear her laugh about my father's death. Didn't hear her plan to warehouse me so she could spend my inheritance with her boyfriend. They didn't have to fight for their own life, while everyone assumed they were too broken to fight back. I didn't ruin Claire's life. She did that herself. The moment she decided that a paralyzed man was an easy target, I just made sure there was evidence. My father used to tell me that the right thing isn't always the easy thing. That standing up for yourself matters, even when you're sitting down. He was right. The last time I saw Claire was in court during her sentencing. She looked smaller somehow. Older. The designer clothes were gone. The perfect hair was gone. All that was left was a woman who'd gambled everything on the assumption that I was too weak to fight back. She was wrong. As they led her away, she looked back at me one last time. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. Just looked her in the eye and nodded once. It was over. Last week, I got a letter from someone who'd heard about my case. A woman whose family tried to do the same thing to her after a car accident. She used my story to fight back. She won. That's when I realized something. This wasn't just about Claire. It was about every person who's ever been underestimated because of a disability, an illness, or a moment of vulnerability. We're not helpless. We're not easy targets. And we're done being silent. If you've ever been underestimated because of a disability, an age, or a situation beyond your control, drop a comment. Let me know what you would have done. And if you want more stories about people who refuse to be victims, hit subscribe. New videos every week about fighting back, speaking up, and proving everyone wrong. Thanks for watching. And remember, being underestimated is the greatest advantage you'll ever have. Use it.